Atty. April para sa paglulunsad ng kanyang kahangahangang proyektong The Education Chapter.
Everyone, good evening to all of you, especially to our viewers here and abroad. Mahabang sa sabi naman.
In all our social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we hope that you'll be able to join us with our newest feature, our Untitled.
Don't be tired of the night, you can just go more.
Attorney Amihan April Alcazar, sa lahat ng bumubuo ng The Education Channel at sa ating mga manunood, magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Una sa lahat, nais kong batiin si Attorney April para sa paglulunsad ng kanyang kahangahangang proyektong The Education Channel. Mahalaga ang episode natin ngayong gabi dahil ito ang premier broadcast dito sa ating bansa. Sa pamamagitan ng programang ito, hindi lamang tayo naghahatid ng edukasyon sa mga mag-aaral ng bansa. Tinatalakay din natin ang mahalagang usapin. Ngayong gabi ay tatalakayin natin ang estado ng edukasyon sa bansa na humaharap sa matinding hamon na dulot ng COVID-19. Para sa akin, hindi lamang ang pagpapatuloy ng edukasyon ang dapat nating tutukan sa new o better normal. Mahalaga ring talakayin natin kung paano nating iaangat ang kalidad ng edukasyon sa bansa. Paano ba magiging mas matatag ang sektor ng edukasyon sa harap ng mga krisis na tulad ng kinakaharap natin? Samahan po natin si Atty. April sa pagtalakay at pagsuri ng mga usaping ito. Bilang chairman ng Senate Committee on Basic Education, Arts and Culture, ako po ay inyong katuwang sa ating pagsisikap na iangat ang kalidad ng ating edukasyon. Maraming salamat at magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Stay safe.
and digital collaboration.
Session for today. Again, I'd like to welcome as well all the guests coming from the industry, the education. So since last year, the 196 organizations and leaders, right, they made the jumps from 1 to 2, right, or even 3. Can you imagine the number of people are going through mental health issues? So that's how will we do this? So we researched, that there are certain things that have already been implemented as a way to inform as well other leaders, in the other agencies. I love this, coming from the Department of Trade and Industry. They're saying that when the nation develops its people, the people is so thank you for today. God bless you. Thank you so much.
And we're happy that for the second quarter of 2021, we were able to among our workers to go out, especially those who have not been vaccinated yet. Overseas po, alam naman po natin na the pandemic has an impact. We speak about 2 million na rin po yung atin pong nare-reach.
So these are the things that we would like to invite everyone. If these are very important to you,
So good evening. Welcome. It's Wednesday night and this is AAA Live. This is your host, Attorney Amian April M. Alcazar, PhD. And of course, definitely, this is the show where your academic goals are advanced and achieved. So for tonight, we have a guest coming from California, near Los Angeles, Dr. Marilyn Brock. Can you give some greetings to our viewers, please?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and very interested in your viewers. I'm so glad you were here to join us for this conversation.
Okay, thank you so much for giving us your valuable time. And so I think it's so interesting to delve right into like our discussion, which we've started a little bit with our introduction earlier. So, can you please give us a little bit of a backgrounder about yourself and the influences that you had as a young person, specifically how you made the decision of your field of study?
Well, right now I'm the co-chair of the English and Humanities Department at Coastline College, and I've been there about 14 years. I've actually been a college professor in total for about 20 years. I also taught at the university level at the University of Cincinnati, which is out in Ohio, and up in Northern California at Sonoma State University.
Yes.
So I've been in some different locations, and then I'm a professor of English. As a young person, I was a very avid reader. I grew up with my father was a lieutenant in the Air Force, the American Air Force, and so I moved around a lot, living in places like Sacramento and on the East Coast, Delaware, Southern California, and was just very into. I remember my favorite book was The Little Mermaid when I was in grade school. I probably read it about 50 times. But,
there you go.
Any narrative that was moving to me and helped me to imagine and help me help myself integrate into different cities with different people and new kids, every couple of years. So that was very helpful and kind of my place of refuge, I think, and how I developed as much as I did in the real world.
Yes.
And my mom actually remarried when I was young as well, and at that time I also became adaptable with a new family. I had new step siblings and lived in a new city there fairly permanently through junior high through high school, and stayed with reading and writing. And by then it was very clear that I was kind of a born writer, and that was what I should be doing.
Yes. So what kind of like skills, competencies, and experiential learning do you think a young person should develop if they wanted to be in your field of study, whether it's going to be in English or eventually like creative writing or humanities?
Well, I would say strong research skills, which is much easier now that we have the internet than
definitely.
It used
Google
to be like
helps.
when I was young. Yeah, but anybody who's interested in looking at a certain topic and reading everything they can about it, and then finding out where you can find a story within that domain of area or domainal area. So, yeah, that's what I would suggest. And looking into libraries, like at Coastline College, they have an online library with all kinds of sources, and also learning what kinds of sources are credible, because the flip side of having so much information at your fingertips is that not all of it is solid. So you have to make sure that it's plausible, credible information, and then your mind will help bridge into whatever you're reading into what it is that you want to write that has your own voice intact with the subject matter.
Yeah. So can you describe the career trajectory that you have undertaken? As you mentioned that you went from like different universities and eventually in Coastline College, and describing the demographic profile of the institution that you've been working with.
Well, I would like to describe it as a staircase, as something just going up and up, but it's not that easy. Most of it has been sideways and then backward and then back up, And that's the reality of any career trajectory. It's not quite as linear as one would hope, but it's, I started out teaching as a graduate assistant. I went for my master's and then my PhD. I was teaching college all the way through grad school as part of gaining experience, and then first got on in Southern California, and then went back to graduate school both to study more ethnic studies, which I thought really supplemented my understanding of American and British literature and creative writing. I've been to some writer retreats, such as the Edna Millay residency program, which was really helpful, I think, in finding a space to write and get some creative work done, which is something I have a hard time finding. I'm also a parent.
No, but yes.
And now that head of the department now, or I'm actually the co-chair, I share the position with
exactly.
But it's hard, to find time. So, I think finding, I've done some residencies in order to do that, and then from here, I'm thinking of maybe eventually toward the end of my career going into administration, maybe as a dean, and staying with the community colleges, because that's been my entire focus for 20 years now.
Exactly. So maybe we can talk a little bit about community college, because that's also been like my research for the Fulbright. And so what do you think is like the distinctive feature of this higher education institution that will allow access to education for a greater number of students?
Well, what's wonderful, and I'll just speak for Coastline, which is where, which is the bulk of my experience, is that it helps you to discover a field of study. A lot of people just coming in don't really know what they want to do yet. And it's really, really important, because your career is something that's going to have such an impact on your life and is really going to shape who you are. So Coastline really spends a lot of time trying to help you find out what career is right for you based on your interests and your skills. And there are a lot of different assessment tools that can help students with that, as well as finding out kind of what they also want to do in life outside of their academics or outside of their career, to kind of see what kind of balance that will be most beneficial for achieving their dreams. So I think the fact that also community college is really focused on working with the community it directly impacts and is involved with. So we look for fields that are going to be interesting to the community. That is, there's all kinds of research done about the career projections and what careers are going to be desirable in the next 5-10 years. It's always looking ahead. So there's a lot of information there to help students decide that will be information that maybe they haven't been in touch with or haven't seen before. And so, there's a lot of new ways to go that maybe they haven't heard of. So there's just a lot of that about, it being the place to be and really become who you want to be, and build your dream life. It's also not expensive, and there's no reason to spend a whole lot of money. And a lot of people even don't have access to it. But even if they do, it's actually a very practical way to start either returning to college or starting college, because it's not expensive. In fact, a lot of people returning can take the enhanced non-credit courses, and so it doesn't cost anything. And it can help them really find something meaningful to do if they're getting back into school or if they're going to change careers. And a lot of people change careers in their lifetime,
Yes. So the model that I actually focused on studying was the Tennessee state model, because of their drive to 55. The state had a vision until 2015, from 2005 to 2025, to be able to have 55% of their population have a post-secondary credential. And that was really more due to the availability of education through the community colleges. So what do you think? Because like California has the largest actually community college system in the United States, democratizing the education for a lot of minorities also. And that's the demographic that you actually have in Coastline College. Is it not correct, Marilyn?
Yes, absolutely. And, the ultimate goal would be to eradicate poverty. There's so much of the different colleges involved with the local economies and the workforce that if, ideally, if everybody would get the degrees as is the goal that you set, then basically we wouldn't have any more poverty. And so, that's a very big reason to be motivated and to be involved and to, help shape the future of California, where I am in the United States.
So, what advice can you give now that we're in a position to give, like, dispensing some advice, we hope, to young people who are on the cusp of making decisions, both for their life, like if they were out of high school, or even if they were just like into deciding colleges or the fields that they will eventually be pursuing? Because as we both mentioned, making those decisions about your career is life changing and will have a long lasting impact on your life.
Yeah, I would say just to know that it's a process that that college can help guide you along the entire journey. So you don't have to know from the beginning where it's going to end or worry about somebody not being there to help you along. It's a process that you will have help with. And it starts with discovery about helping, the college helping you get to know who you are, and then taking action. Training and education, of course, is taking action. You'll be training for the career and educating yourself for the skills, to obtain the skills and competencies that you need to succeed in that career, including soft skills, getting along with people, learning how to manage, learning how to manage time and being organized. And then providing, and then getting the job and getting started in the career. So, there are even services like helping to find a career. There's a career service center. There's, helping with building resumes. So those are the steps that the students will go through.
Yes. So, so I think, and another thing, what you were saying about like the insights, right? Even though we might have like different, cultures, there's always like similarities in fact in terms of like the values of particular cultures. If you really out the threads, right? If you have like this exposure to different cultures, you would still be able to identify similarities in terms of like the value, and then I think you'd find like some common ground on how you could collaborate and understand. So that's what I've continued to do. If I could be in a position to provide that kind of experience to students, even in a vicarious way, because of course, all of that experiential learning requires a lot of resources to undertake, right? And so not all students would have access to that. And I think this is like one possible way, opening up this virtual space really for the students can enable them to have greater access to those opportunities and to those possibilities. Right? So I did spend some time in France too, because the ISEC actually is a French acronym, l'Association Internationale d'étudiants sciences économiques et commerciales. So, but they were based out of Brussels in the 1990s before it became the capital of the EU. So it wasn't as expensive as yet. And of course, the European Youth Commission is based out of Strasbourg, right? So there was much interest, I think, in France also. For So, Marilyn, what courses are you actually teaching right now?
Oh, I'm teaching Victorian Gothic literature, which
Really?
I heard, yeah, it's kind of in vogue right now, which is exciting
Yes.
to hear. So I have we've been looking at Frankenstein and Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Dracula,
Yeah.
Jane Eyre,
Uh-huh.
wonderful classic texts. Never,
Mhm.
always
never
seem timeless.
Yeah. Timeless,
So
right? Scary.
yes. And then other than that, I've been teaching just the critical thinking
Mhm.
course, which is kind of it's after basic composition, so it refines students' writing with developing arguments and constructing arguments and looks at a variety of texts, multicultural, types of texts, and helps further students further with critical reasoning and writing.
And what would
So-
be the demographic profile of Coastline, the institution that you're connected with right now?
Sure. Well, we are an HSI serving institution, which is the acronym for Hispanic Serving Institution. It's a designation from the American government. So
Yeah.
we have quite a few Hispanic Latino students, maybe about, I think over a third, if not close to a half of the students.
Yeah,
And then, yeah, we have quite a few Asian students as well. I
Yes.
think equal amount Asian and Pacific Islander with white students, and
Oh.
then maybe about 10% African American.
Mhm.
And we're right on Little Saigon. We have 4 different campuses, but one of them is actually inside Little Saigon, the actual space of that, and then we have another building that borders Little Saigon. So we're very much involved with the Vietnamese community and the refugees, the families of the refugees that came to the United States after the Vietnam War and the fall of
Yeah.
Saigon.
Yes, actually, in the 1980s, because of the presence of the American military bases in the US, so there was a time that the Refugee Processing Center was actually in the Philippines because of the strategic location from Vietnam and the fact that there was a possible English teachers available from the Philippines to teach the Vietnamese refugees before being relocated to the United States. So that was also
Amazing! That's something I didn't know. I've been
yes.
working. I'm the project director for a National Endowment of Humanities Vietnam Institute at Coastline that'll be in the summer of 2023. And
Really?
I'm still in the process of research, so that's a
Yeah.
wonderful fact. I know I've talked to a lot of refugees that first went to the Philippines before coming
Yes.
over to California.
States, right? Exactly. Yeah. So that was like again part of the very strong ties of the United States and the Philippines. And of course, there was also involvement in the Korean War of Filipino military veterans, having a very close ally of the United States. And again, I mentioned about the strategic military position, geographic position of the Philippines when the American military bases and naval station was really based out of the Philippines. Before now, they are no longer there, although there's a visiting forces agreement for joint military exercises still in the Philippines, right? So these are some of the things, I guess, like when you're very much involved in really knowing about like cultures and different experiences, really also very interested in the geopolitical and the socio-cultural aspects of the different countries that you actually find yourself in. And so that's what I was mentioning about having been in Germany just 3 months after after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And even having that opportunity to visit those countries that no longer exist, such as Czechoslovakia, and having been in Yugoslavia the month before the war broke out, and seeing how it's so very different nowadays, right? From what happened after the war. And even seeing, experiencing like the actual independence. Like I was in Slovenia in July of 1991 when their independence was declared. Those are really some very, I guess, historic, memorable experiences that one can have and really broadens the perspective that you can really have, I think.
Well, the thing is that as a writer, you are, if you're looking for ideas or writing something, your experience becomes entwined with the location that you're in, and you become part of a living text. I think that is ongoing, because you have these new exchanges, and that's why it's so great for new ideas and new developments in your work, because
Yes.
there's that conversation going on between you and the environment that's really, really interesting, because if you're learning a lot of things historically, and then now you're a part of it too.
Exactly,
It's part
right?
of your work.
Yeah, and so that's what I was talking about when I first became a freshman in my university year. This was 1985. And that particular year was when we had our elections that eventually ousted Mr. Marcos, the previous dictator. So I
Hmm.
myself was involved as a student activist in that particular experience, right? And then now 35, almost 36 years after, again, this year is again as historic as it is in the Philippines right now, because
Hmm.
for press freedom and academic freedom, like a person of Filipino heritage was just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for fighting for press freedom, right? Maria
Hmm.
Ressa. Again, this is part of like being part of living history. And so I think it's like those moments that really make the experience and the impressions so very memorable. And again, as you were saying, it becomes intertwined as a writer, intertwined into like what you're actually going to actually be producing. They become part and parcel of you, right?
Well, yeah, and you mentioned activism too, because it's not necessarily a part of studying abroad or international
No,
exchange to
no,
be an activist, but
no.
there are so many benefits to that. Say if you are trying to involved in social change around the
Yes,
world. I mean, there's because right now, like recently, there's been such an increase in global capitalism, and unfortunately, I mean, I had so many hopes for global capitalism when I was younger, or at least globalism, maybe not global capitalism, but I thought, we could come together and cure diseases and,
yeah.
solve great issues and
That
help
was what
people that,
was the ideal of globalization, if you recall, right? When they all started
exactly.
Seattle and the
That's what
EU.
yeah. But what happens is that, unfortunately, that there are people being exploited even more so. And
Even
so,
so.
if you have feelings about these causes, you can actually help fight the causes, or there's, of course, there's, Doctors Without Borders too, helping
Yeah.
with
Yeah, so what happened to me, Marilyn, from like that university activist, student activist, actually what I first next went to after my experiential learning in Germany was then I studied law and became a lawyer and became a legal advocate. So again, that was
mm,
a different avenue to be able to push for the causes, because then if you have the opportunity to actually advocate for the people that you have a like mind with, right, for the causes that you actually believe in, then there are possible legal actions that can be undertaken. So, for example, there was an experience of comfort women during World War II, and this is something that we wanted to push for either compensation or an apology from the Japanese government. Eventually, what they did was to form an NGO to funnel some funds to the surviving comfort women. So that's one for like the plight of the comfort women. And then I mentioned about the indigenous communities, right? Because there's a legislation that needed to be enacted in order to protect the rights of indigenous peoples, right? But eventually, from being a legal advocate, I found that the next level of transformation was education, because then you broaden the possibilities when you actually try to inculcate those critical thinking skills that you mentioned, right, on the people so that they become empowered themselves. Because you could be like
yeah,
as an activist, you're doing it, right? As an advocate, you're trying to defend the causes that you actually believe and want to support. But then I think the greater responsibility, if you can, for social transformation is to provide the people the tools and the ability so that they themselves can be empowered to effect the social change that they would want, beginning with themselves and then eventually.
definitely. And leadership development for positive leaders. I mean, there can be a world of change done just by those particular types of places in the world, developing strong leaders. And then, you know, it's that aspect is just fascinating. And
So that's what I think what happened to me really, as I've mentioned, from that experience as a student activist to really hone the leadership skills early on. If you can identify the potential in students, right? And provide them avenues within which they can hone their leadership skills, then it becomes a natural progression that eventually you might end up in the position of leadership as an adult eventually. And so I think like a natural progression from that young student. So it's been really an insightful discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Marilyn Brock. So maybe you can give some few parting words now to our stakeholders in the education sector, because students, teachers, parents, and administrators are listening to us in the education channel.
I would say that don't be afraid to dream too big and to pursue the life that you love. That you can obtain the tools that you are worth it, and to just go forward, take it one step at a time, and accept the help that is there for you to achieve your dreams, and keep your goals in mind the whole time, and it can happen.
Yes. Thank you so much. Very well said sentiments. So I will just say goodbye. So this has been Attorney Amian April M. Alcazar, your host for AAA Live, where your academic goals are advanced and achieved. So we'll see you again on Wednesday. You can follow, like, subscribe to us on all our social media platforms at the Education Channel. And I look forward to meeting you again very soon, every Wednesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. when we air our AAA Live. So stay safe and healthy, everyone, and good night.